Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.
Hello, and welcome to Champion Psychology, a show with the goal of openly talking about mental health and gaming, presented by Codename Entertainment and TakeThis.org. Every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time here on twitch.tv/CNE Games, or later on your favorite podcast service, though I don't know if that's true anymore. Don't quote me on that. That might be changing. We'll talk about it later. But before we get to that, we are going to be talking about arrival fallacy. Don't worry, it'll be fine when we get to that point later. And before we talk about that, who are you two, for the fine folks who may not know?
No, please. Let me just get a minute. Go with the long Italian name reasons.
Oh my god. No, this is so many technical troubles getting back into seasons. Apparently it's not season 6, it's season 666. That's where we're going with things. Hi everybody. I don't usually go first in this, but I'm Raffael Boccamazzo, better known as Dr. B for long Italian name reasons. I'm a clinical psychologist here in Washington State. I'm also an expert on the applied use of tabletop role-playing games in learning and clinical settings. I am also the clinical director of what was the first mental health nonprofit to serve the game community, TakeThis.org. And I'm so happy to be here for season 6. Yeah. Oh my goodness. And with Treavor, and who's the other person?
Who's that over there in the distance?
Fine, I'll do an introduction. Hi everyone, I'm Mitra Jordan, and I've had some weird technical issues today that I apparently am not equipped to deal with, and they're not to do with my computer. They're sort of more engineering related, shall we say. Anyway, we're here. I'm here. So I'm a registered clinical counselor working in Victoria, British Columbia. I work with individuals. I often do couple and family work. Obviously, I love games of all kinds, video, tabletop, D&D, you name it. And I often end up working with people who also love games, and we talk about that sometimes in terms of the usefulness of that for therapy. So long-winded, my apologies, but here I am.
Not long-winded at all. Don't
worry about that.
That's your intro.
My outros are shorter.
We're back with another season, and as you can see, we're off to a great start. There wouldn't be the show if it didn't start off this way. And for our first topic this season, we wanted to talk about arrival fallacy, which is something I mentioned earlier. But what is arrival fallacy?
Okay, so arrival fallacy is it's a relatively informal term right now. Okay, let's preface this before the internet takes off with this and it's like this is an official diagnosis. No, it's not. Okay, this is a term that was created about 20 years ago by an organizational doctor named Tal Ben-Shahar, a Harvard lecturer on positive psychology. And it's this idea that we've all struggled with from time to time, that it'll be good once we get there. Mm-hmm. It'll be good once we get this goal. It'll be fine once we get the house, once we get a baby, once we get this new job, and it doesn't always hold up that way for a variety of reasons. And so, yeah, we're going to, if you all remember that line at the end of Willy Wonka, the 1971 version, the end of Willy Wonka, that he asks, "Hey, Charlie, did you ever hear what happened to the man who suddenly got everything he ever wanted? He lived happily ever after." Willy Wonka is a liar. Okay.
What would make you say throughout that entire film that Willy Wonka was a liar?
And a liability sir.
That's very true.
Luring children into chocolate death traps.
Oh, yeah, there's a
some,
lot of
some
bad things.
some meanness to children there. I mean, it seems really unfair when so much of the time it reflects on the parents.
Thank you.
Don't worry, they go into more of his backstory in the 2006 version, so it's fine. Because we all needed that. Okay, so we have this thing of like, once I get this job, once I do this thing, once I do insert goal here, as you put in our notes that I really loved, it will be better.
Well, and we'll somehow reach lasting happiness. Which, no.
No.
I've never seen someone say no to lasting happiness with such a smile.
I mean, we've talked about this before.
You know, I feel like we fantasize about a lot of things as humans, and lasting happiness is one of them.
Yeah.
You know, every time, sorry, my nose is so itchy. Every time we, okay, really, no. Every time.
We're professionals.
We are all fine, as a heads up. This is just, we haven't gotten to hang out for a while since y'all saw us last, so we like to have a good time.
All right, I'm getting it together.
Okay, no,
seriously.
scene. Okay, we're good.
Yeah, okay. So, you know, fairy tales always do they lived happily ever after. And so as children, or even as adults who have a goal in mind that they want to live happily ever after, this is really comforting, right? It's a comforting idea that once X thing has been reached, or once I've secured that job I always wanted, or once, you know, I will be happy, I will be fine, there will be nothing to worry about. Unfortunately, this isn't the way the human brain works. And it's not the way we work. We tend to, when we achieve a thing, we start to first notice what's around us. You know, we hit that, shall we say, we get to the mountaintop, right? We look around. And then once we have that 360 view of our new situation, the realities of that situation tend to also occur in much more complex ways. They're
like
more
getting
nuanced.
Down the mountain.
Like how do we get down the mountain? What's on top of the mountain, and can I actually eat any of it? Who are the people with me? I'm sure sick of seeing them. You know, so there's well, you know, it's like this family Christmas will be different if it's with the same people with some of the same problems. Look, you know, then there's probably some predictable ways in which it will be the same, unless you really go out of your way to do something different.
Yeah.
Unless a lot of people go out of their way to do something different. You got to change up a lot of variables in that situation.
Because in those kinds of family situations or family vacations or whatever, you've got the family dynamics that came on the trip with you. So, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's again, we've talked about this before, but the idea of happiness as this eternal, blissful, euphoric state is, first of all, not sustainable. Second of all, not functional. Because, you know, we're talking about happiness versus satisfaction, and those are very different concepts. Satisfaction is a wonderful goal. Satisfaction is a great goal.
Yeah.
The idea of being able to look around and just go, I've climbed the mountain. Awesome. I've accomplished that thing. Now what do I do with that? And then facing those challenges as a realistic construct, you know, reveling in the fact that you climbed that mountain. But this idea that once I get to the top of the mountain, I will be eternally happy. Dude, you got to eat. Like Mitra said, you got to eat. You got to get down off that mountain. Got to find some shelter. Because you're not gonna. There's a whole new list and series of stressors once you get there.
So you both said something about, like, you know, like the fairy tale thing of like for some reasons why this happens, but overall, why do we do this? Like, what is it that for people that do that, it's just like that's my line of thinking for it.
I think it's we always want to simplify things in our heads. Boy, there's, I'm sure, a far better term that Raffael can share with us. But what I mean here is that we have a tendency to shorthand a lot of things in our thinking processes. And if we are looking at a goal I want to reach and there's maybe complex aspects to it, you know, it's a lot of work, say I'm doing a degree program, or I'm trying to lose weight, or I'm juggling a bunch of variables as to how I go about this. I'm dealing with the ongoing process of the challenges to it. You know, if I'm wanting, for example, to eat healthier, but I live in a household with a family with different kinds of needs, say I need to lose weight, but my sister really needs to gain weight. You know, my brother doesn't care. It's all good. And he just loves to have chips as a snack and chocolate and cookies. And so I'm in a household where there's lots of different things going on and I have very specific needs. I can't really expend a whole lot of energy thinking about what happens once I've actually lost the weight or how I'm going to even keep it off necessarily, right? I'm just working on today's goal now. And we have a tendency to only be able to carry so much because we're already juggling lots. I'm doing a goal. Probably I also have a full-time job. Maybe I'm in school and I'm trying to work full-time. Maybe I'm dealing with family dynamics. Maybe I'm dealing with an hour-long commute either way. Maybe somebody has to provide childcare for my kid, right? This is the reality for many of us, right? So if I'm a single parent, I'm earning money, I'm looking after my kid, and I'm trying to get a master's, I'm not going to necessarily be able to expend a whole lot of thought at this point, now that the decision's been made, on what I'm going to do once I've got that master's. I'm sure every single parent has a plan, but I think a lot of them do. But I think in general, if we look at our goals, we're not always thinking about everything around the end point because we can only know so much.
Well, and also, you know, while the idea of hopefulness, of meaning, of having what's considered future-oriented thinking, it can be a really, really great marker of psychological resilience. Because I mean, how do we get through the hardest times is thinking about the potential of a better future. And that is a powerful strategy for us to, you know, get through things. What happens for some of us and for in certain circumstances is that we can idealize those futures, and that's where we start to run into problems with some of this stuff, is having this highly idealized perfect future in mind that is also static. Because, you know, going back to Mitra's metaphor of getting up to the top of the mountain doesn't stay the same as it did the instant we got there. Storms roll in, you know, ice melts, things happen. And the instant we get to that new situation, that one, there may be factors we hadn't conceived of because we'd never been there before. There may be, you know, stressors and external factors that are constantly moving on that. And two, we just may have had the wrong idea of it to begin with. And so it's not to say that hope is great. Hope is wonderful. But where we can run into problems is this rigid, idealized vision of the future.
Yeah, and I think we also just don't know what we don't know. As you said, sometimes we may have a quite clear view of something, but it's changed, right? There's a lot of factors that change how an industry shifts, for example, right? And how the work that you trained to do doesn't end up remaining like viable as a career in the future or something, right? There's so much we can't predict. So, or and this is an example I've come across a number of times, or you lose the weight and people start treating you differently. And on one hand, this is maybe what you really want as well, but it's also kind of really hard to swallow the idea that you really see perhaps how much more positively people treat you than when you had the weight. And you're still the same person. So these kinds of things, you know, a person's reversal of fortune in that they didn't have much of an income, say, and then they inherit or something happens, and the people in that situation have often talked about being treated very differently, and some of um, the difficulty of that when you're still who you were. So
Yes. So this I mean, this idea of hope for the future, I, it has its pros and cons.
Yeah.
It has its absolute pros and cons. And like so many other times when we think about things too rigidly, too idealistically, and too unchangingly, that's where we tend to run into a lot of problems. I I've seen this in many clients over the years that, once I have the job, that's often one of them, that once I have this job, everything will be better. I'll make more money. I'll be able to, and that, having resources is absolutely important. Having resources definitely important, but money only promotes happiness to a point.
Yeah.
Money does buy happiness to a point, by the way.
Well, it's also like within the job, it's like, well, once things slow down,
exactly.
Once things slow down, then I'll have more time for this. It's like, okay, but will you though?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
how many other variables do you got competing for your time?
Yeah. Someone in chat was asking, are we talking about, therefore, not to get expectations up unrealistically? I think it's not just that. Sure, expectation versus reality is a big piece of this, but it's also about not allowing yourself to enjoy the present moment.
100%.
It's like, well, I'll spend more time with my kid when I'm not having to do X thing, or when I'm not quite as focused on my career or whatever. And you have to find ways to build in a sustainable life wherever you're at. And I can really appreciate that at times this is really difficult, but at times having a clear end goal helps. When I finish with this challenging case before I do another, isn't necessarily an appropriate goal. Figuring out a proper endpoint, like someone might say, yeah, I'm working really hard through the school year, but then I'm taking 2 months off and we're going to go do something. That's a much more clear endpoint for a goal, for I will spend time doing X when, right? But I find that what happens for us is things that we actually want get put off in favor of a goal that might not be as clear or substantial.
Well, and what happens, Mitra, when we essentially, so I'm sure a lot of our viewers have heard the term projection, where you are taking something that's maybe amiss within your own brainscape and attributing it to someone else. But there is this other concept called introjection, where you are essentially accepting somebody else's reality with what they say without any critical thought. And when it comes to our futures and our goals, especially when we're kids and teenagers, a lot of us tend to introject other people's ideas of happiness. I'll give a personal example. Very often people are like, oh my God, travel is amazing. Travel is wonderful. Travel is just the best thing. Have you traveled? Where have you traveled? And so forth. Well, it turns out, as I realized as an adult, I hate traveling. I hate it. Absolutely despise the process. I love being there, sort of, but I dislike upending my routines. And also, I live in one of the biggest cities in the United States. And if you get bored living in one of the biggest cities in the United States, I think you need to get a little bit more creative. But I just internalized this idea that somehow I needed to be, traveling to be happy in my life. Turns out it makes me miserable.
Yeah. I brought this up in the meeting yesterday. There is a great SNL sketch with Adam Sandler doing like a travel agency thing where it's just like, if you are sad at your house, you are still gonna be sad in Italy. That does not change. And I felt like that really did speak. It's like, it's okay. When I get on my vacation, then I'll be happy. No, you will still be sad and stressed, just in a new location.
Yeah, so I think partly arrival fallacy has to do with unrealistic expectations for ourselves, but also sometimes it has to do with more distant goals that we off-put our present life to achieve without really considering our day-to-day experience or the needs of those around us or our own needs. So, I mean, we all know about the trope of sort of an overworked parent where a lot of stuff gets the support parent who's maybe working and taking care of kids is the one who's home with them, and that other parent who's working all the time, who's genuinely trying to sacrifice or understands that they can't be at home as much, that parent is also in some ways missing out. And if there's not periodic sort of quality time and a break, they could also burn out, not just in terms of parenting and family, but just in terms of being in touch with your own needs. So this is also about the ways in which we sometimes get focused on some more distant goal without really thinking about who we are and what we really want.
Yep.
And when you talk about introjection with children, the thing that comes to mind is often a kid following in a parent's footsteps in terms of their work. And it's something that, you know, a parent may be super enthusiastic for that kid to do. There's been a lot of encouragement, you know, when you're a lawyer or when you're a doctor or when you're this or, you know, when you take over my construction company or whatever it is, right? And so the kid's like, yeah, you know, and they want to please a parent. But then the reality of that work, once they're actually doing it, you know, I've had clients say, well, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, but then I realized, you know, I was going to be around other lawyers. And my day to day, you know, if you go into something like family court, it can be really difficult.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
so,
please continue. I had a thought.
Please.
Well, so even in my own career, I love kids. Okay. I love being around kids. I think kids are amazing. I thought I was going to end up working with small children because I love kids. Turns out I don't like working with young kids. And part of that has to do with my own strengths and limitations, that I like being around the kids, but I work so cognitively. And this is, you know, my autism. I came to later realize that I'm not good at working, you know, on kids levels when they're small. There's a reason I like work at this point. I work with like 16 to 25 year olds best because we share the same cynicism. When I first got to working with kids at my first rotation, I floundered. It was so different than what I expected, especially when it intersected with my capabilities. I was not good at working with small children. Still think they're great.
They're great, just over there, but they're great.
It is really interesting. I think every parent, by the way, at least in my experience, each of us can enjoy all stages of our children for sure, but we can also be better at certain stages. You know, there are some parents who, for instance, adore and can really endure the newborn stage quite well. Having had 3, I can tell you that I'm pretty good at that stage. But I was really lucky to be partnered with someone who is amazing with toddlers, because that wasn't me. I was fine with them, and they're gorgeous, which is one of the reasons they're all still alive, because toddlers are so super cute. They really are. And when they're sleeping, they look like little angels. And there's a reason cherubs in all of the, you know, art imagery we have, you know, are most of all based on toddlers. You know, I would argue an 8-month-old sits still better than a toddler, just to be clear. But,
they sleep more.
And they sleep more. But yeah, so it turns out I absolutely adored relatively young children, middle children, and I absolutely love teenagers. Adore them.
Oh,
you know,
the last
the more
time,
quirky, the better.
The last time I saw one part of my family, there was a newborn and then my 15-year-old nephew, and the newborn takes one look at me and immediately starts screaming his head off. And I look at my 15-year-old nephew, I'm like, see, I can't talk to him about Dark Souls.
But sometimes
Again,
The
please
only
go.
thing, sorry, I'm really chatty today.
No, you're
but
good.
Well, 3 ADHD people, this is going to
I know,
happen.
right? What are we gonna do? The thing that really struck me about that is I could have had some idea I would be good with toddlers and therefore really beaten myself up for not being particularly, because he's got a particular touch, my partner does, with toddlers, and they just sit together and they're really communicating. It's great. And I'm
I
like,
can
why
see
won't you eat the
that.
carrots? I'm just like, it's just not. But my point with this is that we can end up beating ourselves up for the things we're not good at
Mhm.
that we think we should be.
Yes,
And we
hi, can
have-
I help you?
I'll let you take it from here. Please.
No, please.
No, that's
I just
great.
outed
You've got-
myself.
But I think we do get, it's so easy to get stuck on, I reach a goal, I should therefore be good at all the things with the goal. And it's like, okay, no, it's way more nuanced than you thought. And there's actually some things that are really hard. And maybe you didn't want to be in a hospital with a whole bunch of other doctors. Maybe you don't like other doctors terribly much, even though you like healing people. So then you have to reconsider the plan, right? So
Well, it's interesting for me to think about that all of our future hopes, all of our future goals are based on our present understanding. Like my future career goals in working with children was based on my understanding of just being around the kids in my family, which again, I adore kids. But it turns out the reality of the future was different than my understanding of the present. And working with kids in a specific context is so different than babysitting my younger cousins.
yeah.
And yeah, that caught me off guard. And it was because I had so much invested in this future that I thought was going to have, I thought I was going to have. It took a long time for me to come to terms with the idea that, yeah, I'm not good at this. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm good at other things. But I'm not good at this.
You'll
All
have a
right.
good one. We'll be over.
Yeah, I'm not good at this.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we take a quick break to remind our viewers and listeners of our disclaimer, and then we'll be back to talk a little bit more about rival fallacy. So stick around.
Yeah.
Be right back.
Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.
Okay, it helps when I click the right button. Quickly before we continue, a reminder, if you do have any questions about rival fallacy, you can put them into chat with question : and then your question. Our awesome mods Mars and Martin will grab them and put them in a little text doc that I will look at later. But until then, how do we navigate this?
Well, I think that it's important to consider process as well as goal. So you have you have something you want to achieve, and you might be working quite hard towards it, but how do we, within that, have any kind of work-life balance, right? When I was doing my master's and my kids were pretty little, the absolute worst moment for me was as I was heading towards my thesis deadline right at the end. And graduation was weeks away. And if I couldn't get my thesis in, I wasn't going to graduate on time. And I missed my 9-year-old's birthday party.
Oh.
And I've been very lucky that that's pretty much all I've missed, but at the time, my kid was turning 9 and I felt really, really guilty about it. And at the same time, I felt very pulled between getting that work done. And I was pulling a lot of late nights. It had all been good for the first couple of years, but in that final term where you're busy writing your thesis, and you've got to get it in and you've got to get it proofread. There's a number of stages that take place even after the writing is done. And so it was just really not a balanced moment. And I remember actually my partner saying to me, listen, if this was the reality of our life all the time, we wouldn't be together. Like, he would have left. And also maybe don't consider a PhD, you know? So
quote, clip that.
Yeah.
Don't consider a PhD.
Yeah. And I remember thinking, but I could keep going. Okay, right.
No.
So I guess, the point here is look around, consider the needs of those around you, and consider your needs in terms of this balance I'm talking about. It's funny because when I did my undergrad, I took a whole extra year and a half because I was also working and doing other things through my first undergrad. And there's no way I could have gone to school full time. I was also paying for it. I was also paying rent. I was also working as a chef. But that did provide an interesting kind of work-life balance because it's sort of cooking professionally kind of balanced out somehow the academic work because they're so different. So it kind of met two different needs and as well left a little bit of time for friends and socializing. So you have to think about how you're going to get there. And it might be worth taking an extra year or two to do something. Even my master's was like a 3-year program that was kind of not 100% full time, which is the only reason I could do it with 3 kids. So just think about, can I stretch out this goal a little bit to the more positive benefit to my day-to-day experience? If you have a specific goal like fitness or weight loss, it's a really big consideration to do it sustainably. Because I think that one of the challenges that people can get into that plays into arrival fallacy is all or nothing thinking.
Oh God, yeah. Absolutely.
If I don't get this, then I just won't be happy, essentially.
Yeah.
That, and also, I want to do this as fast as possible. I want to quit cold turkey, right? That's all or nothing thinking right there. So, what's the quickest route to X? But the problem is if you're in shreds when you get there and you've compromised your relationships, not because you're not a good person, but because you just haven't had time to put energy into the relationships around you. And you've forgotten how to have fun.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard to look up and enjoy that summit.
Well, one of the... Oh, shit. One of the things that
Come
I also...
on, Dr. D, that is not you.
It was.
But okay, but then so how did you recognize that it was you and you needed to do different?
After I got my doctorate and I realized nothing was the way I thought it was going to be, I had to do some major adjusting because that's, you're talking about the process versus versus the destination, and that is not all or nothing. We need to look at both, and there's something that I'm really thankful that one of my former supervisors really instilled in a lot of his students is this idea of good enough.
Yeah.
The idea of essentially what he was speaking to is the idea of satisfaction, not perfection, but satisfaction of being able to look at what we've done and say, yeah, I did that. That's pretty cool. And now what? And this is something that I've seen a lot of people in my practice and my personal life struggle with a lot, is conflating or not conflating, but the idea that if I ever am satisfied, then I will be so complacent, I will never strive for more.
I hate that one.
Yes.
And that is a big obstacle to a lot of people because they're scared of satisfaction, because they're scared it will take away their drive for more. And those are not mutually inclusive concepts.
Yeah.
You can be satisfied with what you've achieved and say, cool.
Yeah.
Now what can I do?
Exactly. There is this massive confusion around satisfaction and complacency. One is not necessarily the other, but there's the worry, the underlying fear is that I'm settling or I'm not reaching my potential. Okay, so who's determining your potential? Thing one.
Third grade teacher.
Right? or that parent who was never satisfied. It's felt like to you. You may not
Yeah.
have had a conversation with them to know whether that's true or not, but we've all had, or at least, okay, I'm part South Asian, so I've certainly had the experience of got an A, why wasn't it an A plus? Right? So, and I'm not outing any particular community, but immigrant parents, I'm kind of talking a little bit to you. Like, hello, really? How long are we going to do this? But I think that there is that instilled then feeling that you're talking about, that things I do aren't good enough. You know, and if I'm feeling like it's good enough, obviously I'm complacent, I'm not connected to reality, I'm letting myself and everyone around me down. You know, there's lots of sort of negative self-talk around this. But I think, and sometimes there are things that it's difficult to assess whether we're being good enough or not. I've had many a parent say, when will I know that my parenting's enough? When will I know it's okay? How will I know I'm doing a good job? And this is particularly for parents who didn't experience particularly good parenting themselves. It's a real struggle to actually have a sense of what the right choices, right, are for your kid. And they're different for every kid. So I think it's complicated to answer that question. But I do have one shortcut to knowing the answer, and that is, does your kid talk to you? Are you feeling connected? Can they behave badly around you? And I know that sounds, I'm not saying all out screaming matches. I am saying that, does your kid feel like they don't have to be on their best behavior around you? Do they know that they're loved no matter who they are? That's a measure for you doing a good job right there.
Oh God, that's good.
I like that a lot.
Well, I'm also I'm thinking about something you said a little earlier, Mitra, about needs, and thinking about like my own career journey, thinking I was going to end up working with kids because it's all what I always wanted to do. And I was so focused on I was so focused on the details of that vision. I wasn't focused necessarily on the underlying foundations of that. And that was, I want to help people. And once I was able to come to terms with the idea that I could still help people, it just may not have the same build structure that I thought in my head, it was a lot easier to be more flexible in how I approach things. Essentially, I had to consider what is it that I really wanted about that future. And that gave me a lot more flexibility to essentially go towards that boy, I'm going to sound like one of those terrible Instagram motivational quotes. Like, I'm going to go towards the future that I imagined. I need a coffee cup that says something like, live boldly in the direction of my dreams.
You need a tiara and a t-shirt that says that.
See, and for me, there it is. And for me, it just made me think of a Mitch Hedberg quote. I'm tired of following my dreams. I'm just going to ask where they're going and meet up with them later.
Yes. Yes. But no, in thinking about what was it that I truly wanted, what was it that were my actual underlying needs? And once I was clear on those, I could be a lot more flexible about the destination. Yeah,
absolutely. And it really is okay.
Gosh darn
Rest
it!
on your laurels. Now again.
I got nothing.
Because your laurels are your foundation for your future actions.
I got my wife's
In other words, I like it.
I love this.
That really is working. Yeah,
we've got great. A princess, a goddess, and a witch. That works.
It couldn't be better. Absolutely. And so I think that if your achievements are your foundation to go forward, you need to bring a little magic into the picture.
I think Treavor can do that now.
Yeah, it's true. I need exactly. I need 3 toads first, though.
Okay, you've got us 3.
Oh boy. Okay, let's well, before we switch over and see what chat's been up to, any last thoughts on arrival fallacy?
Yeah, flexibility is so important in so many things in life. Rigidity of thinking can just take us down so many unfortunate paths. Hope is a wonderful thing for moving towards the future, but not clinging to a rigid vision of hope that you may not even fully understand.
Yeah.
Is just so important.
Yeah. So this is where I think with your goal, people are often asked to visualize their goals sort of as clearly as they can. What does it look like, right? To use the metaphor of a wedding day, what do you want your dress to be like, or the cake to be like, or blah, blah, blah. And people can get very caught up in, if it's not this, it's not good enough. It's not okay. I mean, that's often the joke about weddings, but something will go wrong because a wedding isn't a marriage. So what you're saying is stop looking at the wedding and look at the entire marriage. What's the aim here? If it's a form of commitment or love to something that really matters to you, it can take various forms. And in the course of a lifetime, it should. If you're in the same marriage you were when you first got married, I worry that you haven't grown as a couple, for example. If you're in the same career that you were in 10 years ago and it's the same thing, you've probably stagnated. As you grow and evolve, so will your goals. Part of growth is allowing that to happen.
There was a very interesting conversation my wife and I had recently where essentially, like, we've been together for 14 years now, and I had been doing something just without thinking because of something she told me a long time ago. And then recently she was like, "Oh no, it's okay. We can watch that. We can have that on or something. I'm fine with it." I'm just like, "Oh, that's right. We've been together so long. I have to remember some of the things you told me were when you were 18, and like we've changed. We've become different people. So I have to remember that. I have to update myself with you."
Yeah, and finding satisfaction, just being satisfied and content in what we've done is not the same thing as giving up. And people just get that wrong.
Yep. Okay, let's check out what chat's been up to. We're going to start off with Reaver01. Question, can we consider a rival fallacy to be directly caused by or at least connected to the toxic positivity created by some portions of society?
I mean, the two can interact. I'd say they can also come from very different places.
Yeah.
I've known many people who've had no connection to that relationship with goals, but have had a clear, but if I get this job or once I'm working professionally, X will happen. So, but it certainly is possible, right? Because you can build yourself up to an idea around a goal and really kind of pump yourself to get it done. And then it's inevitable that once you reach there, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah,
that's not the reality, right?
I definitely think that there's some overlap. I mean, I have 100% heard some toxic positivity people will be like, once you do this, you're gonna feel so much better about yourself. It's like, no, you're not actually gonna cure my depression. Fun fact.
No, that kale. I've had kale before.
Kale. I've had kale.
Your particular version of kale is not going to make my ADHD go away. I appreciate the enthusiasm. Can you tone it back a bit? I have sensitive ears.
Yeah, I think that it's fair to say that these ideas around goal setting and where they'll take us has been well harnessed by the self-help movement and toxic positivity. So sure.
Yeah.
And
but definitely not like a full-on cause. Like the overlap. Yeah.
Well, what I want to point out to folks is that what's toxic about toxic positivity is an ignoring of potential negative realities.
Yeah.
And essentially that doesn't allow us to properly assess where we are in life. Again, hope for a future is a really wonderful thing, provided we're flexible in it. Like that vision of me being able to work with kids got me through a lot of stuff in grad school. And seriously, grad school is awful. I don't care who you are. Grad school is awful. Just baseline state of things. And the idea that it was a real struggle for me to realize that I wasn't going to get the exact vision I wanted. that carried me through for so long until I recognized it's not the structure. It was the helping I wanted to do. The how I helped was somewhat up for debate, but it was the helping itself that I wanted to do. And once I was able to recognize how that I could help in a different way, I still got my dream. I still got my dream. It just didn't quite look like I expected it to. But you know what? I think it's a little bit better this way.
Yeah.
Definitely, because it's connected to your reality.
Right.
That's a big advantage it's got going for it. And that is, I mean, I think that's the issue with toxic positivity, which we've talked about, so we won't go into it any longer, but it's the ignoring of a person's actual life context. And often these kinds of things that are sold to you about, you should be able to do this, or you should eat that, or, eat real healthy. Well, though that takes into account food availability, your
absolutely,
what you have in terms of your finances and what you have in terms of energy that you can devote to this, and many things that are not reality for many people. So yeah.
The Lurking Writer says, question, how are you all doing? I hope the break was everything you needed and you are fully rested and recharged in ways that matter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's so thoughtful.
Oh, that's so kind of you all.
Yeah. Thank you, Lurking Writer. And yeah, doing good. Happy to be back with awesome people doing this show.
I don't have my hat, as people in the chat have commented, I don't have hats up on the new wall yet, but we're working on that.
That's the important part.
I built the hat wall at my house before I built the hat wall at my office.
You need the office before the walls get decorated. I'd say yes.
I actually grabbed this comment out of chat just so I could bring it up later, but Dragon Zealot at one point said that that mood is a curse, and honestly, cursed mood might be my new favorite thing to say to people.
Cursed mood, band name, called it.
Cursed mood.
Yeah. No, we're gonna do death metal polka.
Oh boy. Let's see. The last one, Lurking Writer comes back and says, question, is a rival fallacy just never departing in the first place? I mean, sort of.
Rival fallacy never departing.
Huh.
That is a very interesting question, which is one of those lovely riddles.
Yeah. Food for thought.
Food for thought. Yeah, you have us slightly stumped, which we're pretty chatty, so that doesn't happen often.
Well, I ended up thinking about that Kingston Trio song Tomorrow.
Which never comes.
No, the train that goes tomorrow is a mile upon its way. Tomorrow it's a town called Morrow in Ohio, and he wants to go tomorrow today.
Okay, well, you know what? That again is a fascinating convolution, but
the train that goes to the train that goes tomorrow will return tomorrow night.
Okay, I think that's a great place to wrap up this week's episode.
Also,
Friends,
tomorrow does never come. So
friends, where can people find you if they'd like to do so on the interwebs?
Well, they can find me at mitrajordan.com, and they can find me at Twitter, which I will check occasionally. If I don't respond today, it's because I'll respond tomorrow. It had to be said.
It did. It really did. No, it was great. That was a great lineup. It's perfect. I loved it.
I'm at the Dr. B. That's TheEedoctorB as in boy. For on pretty much all the social medias. But it's more important that you actually follow TakeThis.org to stay up to date on all the cool mental health stuff that we've got available. And between breaks, we did release a wonderful, wonderful new informational series on burnout as content creators. And part 1 is already up, and Burnout 101 is up. Part 2 is on the way. Dr. Kelly Dunlap, who's been on the show, is doing all the graphics and design for that. She's making it amazing. And also, Trevor, I think there's something else for Take This.
There is something else for Take This. Launching tomorrow in the in-game store, you can pick up Scotty, the rescue pup, who was created by Kelly Butler and helped with Take This. And the net proceeds from the first week, so from tomorrow, September 21st, to next Wednesday, September 28th. All net proceeds will go to Take This to help with all of their awesome causes. So please
Thank
be
you.
sure to pick up that familiar. It really is going to help out. We love working with Take This. We love working with awesome content creators to do these charity familiars, and we love all y'all's reaction to them. So please, the post will go out tomorrow to remind you, but keep an eye out for Scotty the rescue pup. He's so freaking adorable.
So cute.
So adorable.
So adorable.
But yeah, that is gonna do it for this week's episode. Let's see what we got going on. I think everything is normal this week. I say that, but my schedule is not normal at all. So forgive me when those two thoughts don't collide well. Thank you to Codename Entertainment Take This for letting us have a chance to talk about these great topics. And thank you to Martin and Mars for moderating the chat and doing an awesome job. I did mention earlier that we don't know if we're going to be doing the podcast still, so that's still up in the air. But I will let you know next week for sure if that is still going to be happening. It has to do a lot with timing and constraints and a lot of extra work for stuff. So we'll keep you updated about that. But yeah, I think that is it. So until next week, take care of yourself.
Bye, everyone.
Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.